Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is Nicole Caba. She is the founder of a company called Avvinue, which I'm really excited about because they are solving a problem that is near and dear to my heart, which is traveling the world with our pets. As many of you might know, I've been traveling for several years with my Siberian Husky Coda, and let's just say it's been problematic at times. And so I love that Avvinue set out to make this easier on those of us that want to continue exploring, perhaps move abroad or live a bit more nomadically. But we have animals and we tend to think that they can hold us back. Not just that, but Nicole is also living the nomadic dream. She's living abroad in France, specifically in Lyon, and traveling quite a bit, all with her pup Coco. So we talk about all this. What's life like in France? What's life like in Lyon? Being a founder and living abroad and traveling a lot with an animal and all of these things. So a lot of the information that we want to get into here on About Abroad is practical and inspirational, and I think Nicole hits on both of those very, very well. So this was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoy. Please help me in welcoming Nicole to About Abroad. So are you actually currently in France, or I don't know, I'm actually not 100% sure. Do you split time between Europe and the US?
Everywhere. I would say that I have a home base in Lyon, France, because this is where our stuff is. But we spent, like even earlier this year, 4 months in New York, a month then in California, travels throughout Europe. Now we're actually heading to Singapore. So yeah, like everywhere, but we have a home base in Lyon. So that's probably why a lot of people question, like, wait, are you in Lyon? Like, is Lyon really your home? So yeah, it's
that's like that's kind of like the dream. I think that a lot of nomadic types are sort of working towards. I mean, I guess kind of put myself in that. I'm not really that nomadic. I'm kind of living a bit nomadically this year, but I've been kind of like home basey, and I feel like that's where people are going. Like they want that like home base abroad, perhaps because they crave being abroad, but then like to kind of keep on traveling. Was this the idea, or did it just kind of happen this way?
Well, it just happened this way because before I actually moved abroad, I was working remotely. So at the time I was a technical product manager at Siemens. And so I was able to work remotely. That was really great because I got a first glimpse of, okay, working remotely, but then I always had my eyes set on, well, could I live abroad and what would that look like? And it wasn't until I came across like a certain visa that I could live abroad. And obviously everybody goes through this process of like, well, how can I go abroad? Like, what is the options? But I never necessarily thought that when I was going to be abroad, that I would be more out of the home than in the home. So I'm kind of like, I think that there's a transition of like you, let's say, work in office, then work remotely, then live abroad, and then look towards like full-time travel or in between these two. And I'm kind of in between right now. Yeah.
I totally relate to that, those transition phases, like almost precisely exactly my personal story. Like, all right, I kind of have to be in the office. I'm not going to be in the office at all, but I'm still geographically bound. I got to travel more. Okay, actually, I just need location independence and just live wherever I want.
Yeah.
That's how it progresses. And France in particular, was that, you don't sound French, so I'm guessing France is your abroad. Like, how did that come to be? I'm really curious.
Yeah, I mean, I actually like to say that I didn't choose Lyon specifically. I like to say that Lyon chose me. And well, I wouldn't know why, but it's just the fact that I didn't actually pick France nor Lyon, other than obviously once I found visa reason. But my husband and I, we went through this like process of like, well, where could we live? And, you know, I'm pretty sure a lot of people do this of like, oh, what are the options? Where could we live? Even if you're talking about out locally. Like you tend to just go through this like discovery phase of where can you see yourself? Where do you like? What's your criteria? And so we did a lot of this planning because it's like really fun. And
kind of addicting, right?
yeah, actually now it's almost every night that we have this conversation, which is terrible, but exciting at the same time. You know, we started this process and France actually wasn't on the list. We had looked at like Italy, maybe we go to Spain, maybe we go to the UK, like we were trying to figure out in Europe. So we specifically said, okay, where in Europe could we go? But when it came down to actually finding the visa options, France was one of the easiest ones. And that was particularly because I came across a French tech visa. So super easy, super expedited. I mean, now there's so many other visa options you can consider, like there's just tons. But at the time that was like, oh, well, this actually makes sense because I need to make sure that there's a tech community. I need to make sure that there's like, you know, some innovation in the ecosystem or just in the culture. And that's kind of how we decided on France. So it was just like super random.
A couple years before that, I think 2017, my wife and I were going through the exact same process. And interestingly, I never came across this tech visa that you're talking about for France. So I've got some legit questions on this because somehow that never came across my...
You know how it existed. Yeah,
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's very new. So yeah, when I applied, I think it was only like the second year. Like the first of the second year, so it was super fresh. Like even in the immigration world, like they don't even know about the visa. It's so like minimal. You know, they don't get high volumes on it. So maybe now, like, but back then it wasn't. So
yeah, the landscape's changed quite a bit, pretty rapidly. What's it called? Like just so like if anybody.
Yeah, so it's called Passeport Talent. Okay. So it's like talent passport, and then it's the innovation. So there's actually three. There's like if you're an investor, if you're a founder, or if you're an employee of a startup. But I think it's like French Tech Visa website. You can just find it through that.
Wow. Okay. Is there like, not asking you to be a visa pro by any means, but like just bullet points? Is there anything in particular that they're looking for or that you would like advise people to have?
Yeah. So if you're going as a founder, that's really what I would know. I don't know the other ones, but for the founder, it was like you needed at least in your savings, the minimum salary. So I think at that time it was like 15,000 US. Then the other criteria was you had to have an idea, an innovative idea that was approved by an incubator in France. So you actually needed to be accepted into an incubator program. At the time, I think there was around 20 or so, because I literally applied for like all of them. And then once you get approved, they give you this letter that you can now use for a visa to enter, and then you can get a 4-year renewable visa. But the point is that you have an idea, it's more of the ideation stage, but every incubator is different. So there's some that are more later stage, like, okay, you need to have revenue, you need to have this. But the point is that you're bringing a company into France that will help stimulate the economy, or that'll just drive more talent here, because that's one of their initiatives.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. That's really smart scheme to get like talented young people in and hopefully they build flourishing businesses. I assume they eventually want you to like, you know, build the business there, pay taxes there and stuff, but that's initially they're just trying to get you.
Of course they do.
Yeah. They're not doing it out of their kindness of their heart. Let's get that straight.
but actually I really find that it's interesting. Their whole idea is that they have a lot of French talent that goes to the US and then they build great companies there. And they're like, why can't we keep them here? And so that's basically why they're just trying to make sure like either they can start bringing back the talent that they let go, but, you know, just making sure that it's, you know, the culture is more risk averse to the startup culture, which it's getting there, but it's by no means like US standards.
I've talked to people, other founders that have moved from the US, or actually when I think on it, most of them are foreigners, like non-US based people, but they as founders feel this need to be in the US, to kind of be in that environment of around, you know, in the Silicon Valley environment, kind of to put it in like the most stereotypical form.
Yeah.
they feel like they're at a disadvantage if they're not there. Do you see any, is there anything to that?
Yeah, I would actually say, so when I mentioned like I moved here, I thought, well, since it's a French tech program, there should be some kind of ecosystem. And mind you, in the US, I started getting involved in the tech community in New York, in Atlanta. And yes, they're there. But when I arrived here, I noticed it's almost like a conflict of culture in terms of if you're in a startup, this is how I define like a startup community or a community in general. There's a certain level of openness, whether it's an openness of just like being vulnerable to say, hey, I don't know, can you help me? Or another side of, hey, I know someone, I can help connect you. And there's like this sense of help that you give to each other. I don't know how to explain it, but that's something that I don't find here in France. And I would say that in some cases there's culture blocks because I think there's a very much private to the point of, oh, I found out how this works. I'm not going to share it with you because that's my secret sauce and it worked for me and I'm just going to run with it. And that doesn't work in a startup community. Like you want this like openness of like, oh my gosh, I failed, like help me. And also here is not very accepting of failure. Failure is not like you can't fail. It's not an option. And the other thing is pivots don't exist the way that they do in the US. So I think that a lot of these things impact why people feel they should go to the US where it's very much more, or even other startup, communities. There is more openness of like, all right, it didn't work. Let's try something else. Like, let's go. Let's just make something work. So I would definitely say that that's really important. I'm honestly lacking that. And that's probably why we have this discussion almost every night of like, well, where's next? Where would we go? Because community is important. And whatever that community is for you, you should be true to yourself and finding out like, well, what do I really need? So that you can make sure you can either find or build the community that you're looking for.
I think that's really awesome perspective and nice to have a fresh coat of paint on this conversation because a lot of the discussion around moving abroad and starting companies is all about like celebrating the successes and the fun and the kind of like the Instagram version of life, and there's a lot of challenges to consider. Funny enough, I was talking with a British guy who was telling me very similar story to what you just told me. This was a few months ago actually on the show. And we were talking about a conversation that we had both listened to called The Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. It's like one of the top business podcasts in Europe. And he was interviewing the CEO of this company called Brewdog, which is like one of the biggest craft breweries in Europe. So they're like the top craft brewery and they're basically a startup. I mean, they're in the beer industry, but they're equivalent to a startup. They really, really interesting story. Like they did crowdfunding to raise capital and like got like private investors and stuff. And anyway, long story short, he was referencing all of these same things, saying like, I'm competing against companies coming out of places like the US. And he's like, they celebrate your successes and your failures. There's this like mission to but when you fail, it's like, hey, let's all pick each other up. And yeah, it's competitive, but it's like a community of competition and you celebrate the sweat equity that's put in. And whether you fail or succeed, there's like a lot of vibrancy around that. And he was like, and I lack that here. He's the guy in the interview saying like, when I succeed, people say like, oh, you're greedy, oh, now I've become a millionaire.
Man, that's terrible.
and so I see that a lot too. And I was just having a conversation with a German guy here. I'm in Germany right now. And he was telling me almost the exact same thing. He was like, they want the system here is designed for me to kind of like get in line, be at a big company and like not go out and be entrepreneurial. And so all of these things kind of work against me. And so anyway, I find it really interesting because we love to talk about traveling and living abroad and all the cool things that come with it. But from a founder's perspective, like these are real things to consider.
Definitely. These are things that you'll continue to think about because also what you need right now may not be what you need later. And so when you're working abroad or working remotely, you have to find out what are my needs right now. And if that means being very involved in a community, then maybe that's what you need. Or if it's like, hey, I can actually have a community that I build online, then that's also really good. As a matter of fact, during the pandemic, I posted on Twitter, hey, if any other solo founders want to get together every week, let me know. I actually then received quite a few requests, and by quite a few, I mean like 10. And we started a Slack channel. I wanted to make sure that everybody was around the same stage. So everybody was either in like, not necessarily pre-seed stage, but past ideation. We had at least either had a first few customers or like on the verge of first few customers. And we've been meeting every single week on Fridays, like now for almost 2 years. And you know what? That fulfilled the need that I had during that time. And that was the community that I needed. So sometimes you can find the community or build one in person where you're at, or you can live in a bubble like me and just do it online. And it could still fulfill that need as a founder that, you kind of want to feed off of. And there we talk about highs and lows, gives and takes, and we support each other along the way. And honestly, I feel like they're much better friends than I probably could meet in person. And I've actually met a few of them in person now. So like, I don't know, it just feels like a family. And that's sometimes what you need.
Yeah, I think sometimes you got to be really creative and proactive in lots of ways, right? Like when you've made the move out of your comfort zone and like you've lost your tribe, you've lost your community or your home. I mean, you've changed so many core elements of your life. You have to get innovative, and you have to kind of figure it out. There's some fun in that. I mean, it's challenging at times, but it can be fun. And then like the fruits of that labor can be really rewarding. Like what you created there, you probably built these great deep relationships that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't left your comfort zone. So I find that that's kind of like often the end result. Like there's some low points and then you figure out a way, and like the end result is actually better than what you could have imagined when you started off on the journey a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of also on that point of like where you decide to live. So, just in terms of the city or the country or the culture that you're kind of diving into is also just understanding like who is around and like what kind of people that you start meeting. For example, a lot of people that we meet, they have brick and mortars. And so the conversations and the energy level is very different. As a matter of fact, like when we're around people that are just talking about their like, oh, well, we're going to close the shop, we're going to go away for a holiday for a month or whatever, all these things, it really does impact you. So in a way, that's why some people look for cities or even the US or just somewhere else that has that energy. So there's community, but there's also energy, and you can find energy in different ways. And I'm very much of an energy person. Like I feel and feed off of different energies. So even if you find a place that maybe doesn't have the community, maybe has the energy. And so I would say like look for those things.
That's really, really good advice. It's kind of interesting. We both found that energy in sort of like second tier cities. When people think of going to France, they probably think of Paris or maybe like Marseille or Nice or something like that. Like you found Lyon, which is a place that people know, but maybe on that second tier. For me, it was like, I went to Spain, went through the same process as you, by the way. Like I wasn't necessarily trying to go to Spain. I just found a visa that worked for Spain. I was like, oh, cool. I kind of want to learn Spanish. That would be fun. Let's do that.
There you go.
But anyway, I landed in Valencia, not like Madrid or Barcelona. So I don't know. I think there's like...
Which was on my radar too, Valencia. I heard it's really amazing. Like, well, I won't share too much because I heard you don't want to like make it become too touristy.
No, go for it.
It's really nice.
Go. Well, the same about Lyon. I mean, this is what a place like, so it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you haven't been to Valencia. I haven't been to Lyon. So maybe we can just have a conversation about that, because I'm super, like I've heard, like, for instance, Lyon is like the foodie capital of France. Someone told me. I have no idea if that's true or not.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's taste in cuisine is very different, but yes, there's lots of restaurants, amazing food. There's like probably the most Michelin star restaurants, like on every block you can find something. But I definitely would say like the quality of food, the appreciation for how it's prepared is very important here, which I absolutely love, because coming from the US, like this is garbage. everything. Yeah. So here it's very protective of like from farmers. There's no pesticides, there's, how it's prepared. It's just very much part of the culture here. So I love that. It's also a very clean city. It's like a city town. They call it that because it's small. You can walk everywhere. The subway or the metro is super clean. They even have music there. Like, it's just nice. Everything is like very, very nice, but the energy is lacking in terms of like, if you want to feel like go, 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 this is not the city. You go out and you're like, oh, I want to enjoy it because it looks so beautiful. So, so that's where like, of course, work-life balance, but you got to make sure that, I'm a city girl, so it's a little too slow for me kind of thing.
I get it. I totally get it. The word that comes to mind is like pleasant, like a place like that. Like, again, I haven't been to Lyon, but it sounds like very, very pleasant. Like if you need to calm down a little bit, but you still want a little bit of a city, it's a nice, calming, pleasant place to go where you have good food. And it's like right there on the, like geographically, I mean, you're right there at the foothills of the Alps. So you could be in the French Alps or the Swiss Alps. I mean,
that's actually one of the benefits that they mentioned about Lyon is that you can easily be at, you can go to different lakes that are gorgeous. And there's Annecy, Aix-les-Bains. You can go to the mountains. So you can easily, like 1 hour, 2 hours, you can go somewhere. Whereas, for example, you go to Paris, if you want to go to Nice, you need to fly. If you want to go to the mountains, you need to fly because driving is going to be at least 5 hours. So, it's like really good proximity. However, if you're looking for a really great international airport, not the best option.
Not the best. Okay. I was literally going to ask you about that because that is a thing that comes to my mind. Like, it's not a place I would think to fly into. I'm actually not too far from you right now. I'm in like this, I'm near Annecy, or not near Annecy, sorry, near the Alsace or Alsace. I don't know how you say it in French, in Germany. So right on the other side of the border, but so it's not too far. Anyway, I was looking at flights like from this region and it's not super, there's not like a great way to get there by plane. If you're in Central Europe, by train, probably the best.
Yeah. And it depends where you're going. Sometimes there's no option, or like I was even looking at taking the train to go to Amsterdam for the conference. I'm like, why am I going to fly? Let me just try to take the train. It was 5 transfers. Like, I know I'm going to fly. Like, I'm not doing 5 transfers. So I would say, if you travel frequently, which is now becoming our case, is like we travel a lot and you need to be at a certain place. You're not as flexible for travel, meaning like, well, let's just find where's a direct flight from Lyon. You can easily find that and just, make your plans around that. But if you need to be like somewhere, like I go to conferences, it's complicated. Like there's always a connection.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases. Yeah.
Yeah. That's worth noting for sure. I think it's funny you talk about the energy, like, so, and I think the word that comes to mind for me is like the FOMO, like you're talking about like you wanted to be in France, you're in this nice place, but it has you thinking like, but I kind of want to be there too, right? And you have that conversation with your husband like every night. I can 100% relate to this, doing the exact same thing. And what we were looking for right now after 4 years in Valencia, which is a very energetic city. People, like they say in Spanish, like the people like live in la calle. And like they're, people just like live in the street. It's almost like we joke about and say, vale, no lo sabía. we should.
Your audience is going to learn Spanish, so.
Yes. We should have tried this in Spanish. No, it would have gone poorly. But I mean, Valencia is like super energetic, right? Like the people live in the street. We joke about it and call it like a reggaeton party, and like where we are now is a bit more like a symphony party or like a cocktail party or something. And so, my wife was really wanting a break from that energy. Like she was craving like something a little more, a little more pleasant, which is why we're up where we are right now. So I think it's funny how you can kind of like, you can start like when we went there, we just loved that lifestyle and just like the frequent energy and are always something to do and late evenings, not like necessarily like partying, but I mean like dinner lasts until midnight or 1 and it's long and fun and energetic and lots of people
That is
around.
so my type of energy. Like, I think we should swap.
Yeah, it sounds like we should have. And so it brought, that's what dragged us up here. And now, like, we've been up here for a few months, and I'm like, I was just back in Spain for a couple weeks, or a couple weeks ago, and I was like, man, I'm loving the like warmth and the sun and the people outside and the activity. So yeah, you want what you can't have, and this paradox of choice is like kind of annoying.
Yeah. And it's also, even what, like I was saying, like what you want now is different what you want later, or as we're consistently growing as people. Like as we connect with other cultures, you start picking up pieces from different cultures, and it becomes part of who you are. And so like you change, like for example, like even when we came here, we were coming from New York. So, okay, it seems so cute. Like, oh, Lyon is so adorable. Like we love it. It looks like a movie set. Everything is just like literally everything. It looks like a movie set, the whole city town. And, but now we're like, okay, but we prefer the city. So like maybe we should find more energy again. So it's like you learn and you change and you find what works for you. As long as you're just open and honest with yourself, because I think sometimes people do very drastic changes. I've heard some people like, oh, I saw these movies and I wanted to live in the countryside and it seems so great. Like I want to go there. And then they go there and are miserable. But that's where you have to reflect on yourself. Like really, what do you need or what do you want? And not just go with what seems adorable. Yeah. Pleasant.
This is so true too. And I've seen people like uproot their entire lives to make that move happen, and then get there and like 3 months into it, like this was a terrible idea. I should not have done this. I think the good news is you can always revert back, or more often than not, you can revert back. But I think dipping your toe in the water and maybe figuring out if what the change that you think you need is what you actually need is pretty sound advice.
Yeah.
We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my good friends over at Greenback Tax. As an American citizen, I'm from one of only 2 countries in the entire world that requires I pay taxes on my global income, regardless of which country I'm actually living in. So when I started my expat journey back in 2015, I knew my tax situation was about to get complicated. Fortunately, I discovered Greenback, and I've never looked back. Greenback is 100% focused on helping U.S. expats with their tax situation, and to date, they've filed almost 50,000 returns for nearly 15,000 happy customers from more than 200 different countries. After 7 years working together, I can say with confidence that they make one of the most painful parts of life abroad an absolute breeze with their automated systems, friendly advisors, and expertise in the very specific niche of U.S. expat taxes. Also, for those of you who may have fallen behind on your taxes and/or you're trying to get ahead of tax season in 2023, Greenback has your back here as well. They can assist with late filings to ensure you don't encounter any problems with the IRS and to make sure you start 2023 off right. Tax season is on the horizon. Learn more about Greenback today by going to greenbacktaxservices.com via the link in the show notes. Hey guys, so many of you write in asking how to support the show best, and if you are listening and made it this far into the episode, then I'm going to presume that perhaps you're one of those people that wants to help. So if that's the case, the best thing you could do right now would be to open up the app that you're currently using to listen to this episode. Go to the little arrow thing that allows you to share, select it, and share it to one of your social media networks. That would be a huge, huge help. You can feel free to tag me at DC Warrington, and I'll slap you a virtual high five from wherever I am in the world. Thank you so much for the support. We really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy listening to the rest of this episode.
So what's the cadence like right now for you? What does a year look like? Are you mainly in Lyon and travel, take little trips from there? Or are you kind of spending multiple months in different places? What does it look like?
Yeah, right now, well, at least this year. So obviously we went through the pandemic, so not very many options there. We just stayed here in Lyon, and we visited family once or twice. Now that things are picking up in terms of I need to travel for my startup to go to conferences and meet with customers, is now we're trying to figure out planning travel around those conferences. So like I mentioned, we spent earlier this year in New York. It was just a way to reconnect and just be close to family after, as the pandemic. But now, literally a few hours ago, we were mapping out, okay, plan A, plan B. Should we do one country a month? Should we do one country 3 months? We are just talking about this, I'm telling you all the time, and then trying to figure out, well, maybe more intentional travel around these type of conferences. As a matter of fact, just earlier this week, I was connected with a full-time traveler, and she's been traveling all around the world, I think since 2014, and 1 month, 3 months, different countries, and is now staying in place here in France. And she's like, it's just so different for me to set a home base. And, you know, just like hearing her obviously sparked this whole now discovery again, because, you know, when you get a glimpse of somebody else, they give you a different perspective. And, you know, it was the whole concept of, do you need a home base? Like, is the home base actually practical for you if you travel so much? And we rent. So is there a better option than renting and having, you know, rental overhead versus, well, you're traveling almost full time. Why, you know, what would allow you to just consider traveling full time? Like, what does that make sense? And, you know, so there's obviously a comfort. You have to think about what we're thinking about, like, what do we really need to feel like we're not just like lost in travel and just like, oh, we have no place to go back to. So yeah, so it's really interesting. Like when you tune your ears to other people's experiences, kind of helps paint the picture even better, but definitely don't focus on just the best parts. Like also ask the bad parts because they're very true. And I think a lot of people only focus on the good part and they're like, no, I'm going to fit into that culture really well. I'm going to learn French really well. Like, it doesn't seem that hard. I took French in high school. Yeah, okay. You're going to have probably the same blockers that I have. Okay. So it's just sometimes you have to take the advice that people are sharing, or at least be aware of it.
It sounds like the four of us just need to be we're already having the same conversation every single day. So it sounds like we should just be like jumping on a conference call and just helping each other through like group therapy together.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that there's other couples and that would be more than happy to do this whole, I wrote it down as the Caba World Tour. And so.
I think you're right. I was joking with someone recently, like, we just need to like pick a place and say, hey, like a bunch of, you know, remote workers and founders and people who are in this world. Hey, we're all going, like 10 of us have decided we're going here. We're not thinking about it. We're tired of talking about this every day. So we're picking Lyon, France, and we're just going there and we're going to have, like, we're all craving community. We're all craving like being abroad in a cool place. But, you know, we just need to pick a place and shut up and quit thinking about this because we're spending so much brain power on it.
Yeah, we literally are writing the different countries because now, well, for me, now that I've lived in France, so my parents are from Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. And so I'm like, but I have not fully lived as an adult in a Spanish-speaking country. And I'm finding myself obviously like presenting to customers in Spanish and all of that. I'm like, oh my God, like I have not been fully immersed into this. And I'm like, you know what, that would be really great. Like, why not see that side? Because obviously as you're sharing, like, you know, our cultures, or at least like I can say like a lot of the Latino cultures have very warmth and inviting like sense. And that's something that we don't get here in France. So we're like, maybe we can try something like that just to see what to compare. So that's
what's the hesitancy? Like, or I don't know if hesitancy is the right word, but like, it sounds like that's what you're kind of craving. And like Spain's just right down the road. Are you strongly considering that, or what? I guess a better way to ask the question, like where's on the list?
So actually Spain's not on the list. I would say, I mean, now because we've been in Europe, so I'm actually thinking of Latin America. And so I put like Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, or Brazil as options, or Dominican Republic, which for us was more of, well, maybe we can go there and kind of set a home base there, because no matter what, I will always want a place there, because also my husband's from Dominican Republic. So we're like, okay, maybe that would make sense, have a home base there and then do full-time travel. So those are on the radar right now. They're on the list. We wrote it down. I would say the conversation actually has been very new it wasn't until maybe 2 months ago that I had started doing like presentations in Spanish. And that's when it started like, maybe I should not do, focus on European countries. Like maybe I can go to Latin America. And so that's still, this is fresh, but I would say it'll probably take another month just to like map out and decide like, hey, where, because it would mean removing our current home base. And, as after you live somewhere for a while, you're kind of like, oh, but I have my furniture and I have my stuff. It's harder to get rid of everything, I think, in a foreign country. I think, but maybe it's not.
Yeah. You're speaking to someone who sold their house and now currently owns no property, but has 2 storage units on 2 continents and a van.
Oh, man.
It's I've gone through that struggle. I understand it. Nobody's gonna feel sorry for you or I when we're having this discussion. But I just being real, like there is this sense of like, oh shit, do I have a home? Like I have a storage unit. I have like these antiques that are family heirlooms, or a sofa or a mattress or whatever in a storage unit on the other side of the world. But do I have a home? And then you start questioning like, is it worth it to keep that stuff, or should we just get rid of it? It's been years. There's a weird attachment to things, and then I think also, I don't know if this is a uniquely American thing. It's not for sure, but I think it is kind of like uber ingrained in us with this like passion about your home, like having a home, which we're told early on, like, buy a home, invest in a home, have a home. And so I think there is something about that also. Like you do feel like, I'd be lying if I said you don't feel a little bit like homeless, even if you're staying in a really nice, like we rented an Airbnb now for 3 months. I lived in the same apartment in Valencia for 4 years. Like, I had a home by most people's standards, but there is this sense of homelessness that is sort of goes a little bit untalked about, I guess. So that's a real thing worth considering. Yeah. Like the nomadic lifestyle is fun and very, very exciting in a lot of ways, but that exists as well.
Yeah. And that's where I feel like if there is a home base that is like really cheap,
yeah.
like where you're not really worried about a mortgage. And that's why we're like, well, maybe Dominican Republic would make sense because we could actually get a home base with these things that don't have to be stored in family's home. And really, it's not even a lot of stuff. Like actually, I hate having stuff. I'm very much, I either every quarter donate a ton of things or throw it away. If I don't like seeing it, I'm like, throw it away. I don't want to see it. Like, so I hate clutter, but there's still certain things that you want to keep,
Yeah, totally. I was going to say, something I find funny that maybe a lot of people listening to this, they were excited to listen to this episode because you're a pro on the movement of animals around the world, which like part of the reason we wanted to have this discussion is that's a big part of my story and my abroad journey as well as like the fact that I've traveled with my big Siberian husky all over the place. And that's been a real challenge and also like a grounding factor for me because it's kept me in a lot of ways like in one place. So his name's Coda, so I don't keep referring to him as it. And so what's really cool is like this is a thing that I think keeps a lot of people home. I've heard it a million times. Somebody says like, oh, I would love to do what you're doing, but I have a dog or I have a cat and like I'm just not going to do that. You're talking about all this travel and movement and doing it all with a dog, and you're building a company that's enabling people to do that. So I'm kind of fascinated to like dive into this whole part of your story. Like I want to hear the backstory. I want to hear about what you're doing. So let's start with the backstory about like how this came to be. Like introduce what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So my startup Avenue actually really started where we were focused on helping people relocate abroad. That's really how it originated because obviously I moved abroad and the logistics was something that wasn't very clear. There's a lot of blogs, there would be a lot of content out there, but not really give people step-by-step instructions. And so what we did was we actually would provide certain services to these people relocating. And one of them was pet relocation. And then we started finding out that the majority of people who were relocating abroad had pets. So it just naturally intrigued me to, get a license and to being an animal transporter, to learning more about, okay, how does this actually work? But I didn't have a pet at the time. So when we moved to France, we didn't have a pet. And during last year's Christmas time, we went to New York to spend time with family. And the first day that we arrived, my husband surprised me with our now toy poodle. His name is Coco. And so it was completely like out of the blue. We had talked about getting a pet, specifically a dog. And just it was always, well, we don't have a backyard. We don't have a yard, so we shouldn't talk about it. And all of these things around like, oh, you should have a perfect scenario to have a dog. And I was like, come on, like we could have one. Anyways, we arrived in New York. My husband surprised me with the cutest little fuzzy, adorable poodle. And at that moment, we're like, okay, great. We need to figure out, because in 2 weeks, we were heading to visit my family. And so immediately we had this pain point of, okay, like we need to make sure he has all of his vaccines. We need to make sure we get him on a flight, all these different things. And that's really when I started feeling the pain point of my customers as like a customer than myself. And that's when it became like, obvious to me that this is what I should be focusing the startup on. So we actually pivoted, and all the ups and downs of a pivot. I mean, I could share that in another conversation, but just this whole emotional battle of like, but should you do it? Should you not? The facts and the numbers were there. It just meant that I had to pivot. So we officially pivoted, and now we are 100% focused on helping people travel and relocate with their pets. And the way we are doing that is by working with airlines directly. Like we are providing them the software that they need so that people who are traveling with their pet know how in the world it works. Because people are researching and there is all kinds of information online. Like you could just go down a rabbit hole and still not know the process. So we're enabling people who travel with their pets by putting it with the airline. So if you're going to fly with your pet, now you can know, well, what vaccines are required for that country? How pet friendly is that country or that city? Is there a seat available for that flight? Does my pet actually fly on that through that airline? Like, is my breed species allowed? Is the weight requirement? All of this like super, super easy for you to find that out and book your flight. And then obviously we expand that to now you can buy accessories like crates and carriers and book pet-friendly hotels. So all of these things, but we're just giving it to the airline. So that's now what we've been focusing on. And obviously that's something that's super important to me because Coco obviously loves to travel. Like maybe more than me. I don't know. Like he loves it. As a matter of fact, he's more well-behaved in a hotel than here at home. Like here he has accidents. In the hotel, he's like, perfect. I'm like, where? He doesn't bark. Like we train him obviously like to leave him, to not bark. He, plays. And so like there's all these things that we just want to help the community of people who are either nomadic, travel, or relocate to know how in the world can you do that with a pet. So that's what our mission is. We're starting with the airlines, but eventually it will be more like hopefully B2C to help people just directly.
So it's so useful. Yeah. I mean, it's such a painful process. I had like a huge disaster happen that I feel like wouldn't have happened if Avvinue existed at the time. We were in Ecuador with Coda, and we were trying to fly to Europe, and we bought a ticket, we paid for everything, booked an Airbnb for like a couple months, and like had everything covered, and then found out that Europe considered Spain or Ecuador a high rabies country, and so you couldn't fly directly. Yeah, so we couldn't fly directly from Ecuador to Spain. He had to go back and do like a quarantine period in the US and get like re-vaccinated, and so it was like crazy, and we didn't know all this, so like we ended up we would have lost like a ton of money if we wasted everything, so we had to I ended up flying back to the US with him, doing quarantine, and then flying to Spain. It was like this huge thing over one line in some documentation that was way outdated. It's a huge pain, and there's like tons of little bullet points that you have to cross your T's and dot your I's, and so anybody that's simplifying that process has a special place in my heart.
Yeah, it's super complicated for so domestic, or I'll just say U.S. domestic versus international. Yes, the CDC is the one that creates high rabies, risk for rabies locations, and then the country has their own requirements. As a matter of fact, there's countries that will say this breed is not even allowed. So it doesn't matter if the airline lets you. The problem is airlines are not checking if that country will allow. So they're leaving it up to you, and that's where we find that's the problem. The airline, just how they check passengers, hey, what's your passport? Can you actually fly to that country? They validate you as a person, but they're not doing enough for the pets. And that's why we are working with airlines, because they should be guiding you. You're flying with them. They should treat you as your pet as a passenger, and they should have everything that's needed, like exactly what documents, what is the timeline of things that you need. Hey, we actually highlight high risk for rabies or quarantine is 10 days or 12 days, titer test, rabies, all these things, vaccines that you'll need to go to that country. And so like all of these different, like very much business rules and logic, is what we put first in the product. So you are not like, I got to read all this stuff or find it. You just know what you need to do. And that's how it should be. Yeah.
Yeah. They warn, I mean, the airline will warn you about like your, whatever it may be, COVID or visa or whatever, like as you're going through that process, there's pop-ups and stuff. But I mean, when you go to book the ticket for an animal, it's totally different. And often you have to like I don't know if you've seen this too, but like you have to like work with, in my case, like I have to work with the cargo department on an airline. So like now I'm booking a ticket for me via one platform, like I could book that online, but then I have to actually like call somebody and talk to the cargo department and make sure that there's space for him, and like I even had one time, Nicole, where it's like you would totally empathize with. I think we actually booked a flight with the cargo department on a flight, and then we went to the airport a day before to make sure everything was okay, and they were like, yeah, everything's fine. And at the last second, somebody said, oh, hey, but what type of plane are you on? And I was like, I don't know. Like, let's look at it. And they were like, oh yeah, the doors on that plane aren't big enough to fit your dog's crate on there. So I booked the right flight. I did but you're on the wrong size plane. And you're like, dude.
Yes,
I mean,
it's terrible. Yes, exactly. Because you're not, and you shouldn't. If you have to look up this information, that's already a bad customer experience. Yeah. We actually take that into account. So actually airline and cargo departments, they don't share the same data. As you see, they also use different systems. Ours is the first system that connects airline and cargo for animal transport. And the reason why is because airlines currently use a standard cargo system, and they're just using the animal side. Animals are not cargo. Like our pets are not cargo. They should not be using the same system. So that's why ours is like, hey, these are people's family. These are their pets. Like, here's all the things that need to be accounted for. But yes, we actually look at aircraft restrictions, journey restrictions. If there's stopover, layover restrictions, the airline sets all of their parameters. So when you actually go to just search your flight, you can book your flight for yourself, your pet, if it's in cabin, or your pet that's in cargo at the same time.
Wow.
So those are all things that, yes, like our whole system is really a full system for airlines just around pet transport. And those are the things that a lot of people don't think about. So.
Wow. So would I use Avvinue as a customer, or would the airlines like kind of using your software?
Yeah. So we actually sell the software to the airline, and that means that anyone that's booking a reservation for a pet would be using our software. So if you're flying with that airline, you would be using our system. Yeah.
Oh man, I would be. They should come up with some kind of like frequent flyer thing for this demographic of people, so that because
we're talking about it. Yeah,
that's an awesome idea, right? Because like I would be very loyal to that airline. Like there's different reasons people are loyal to different products. The ones that adopt that and make it easy, it's literally a reason. Like this is a legitimate reason why I don't have like a home base in the U.S. and a home base in Europe. I could live in both places, but we've kind of had to choose because we're not going to fly him in cargo around or back and forth across the Atlantic. So we're not going to end up spending significant time in two different places. So anyway, somebody who's making that easy is I love it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's been very exciting. This is why I travel a lot now, even more. It's just making sure that that, we onboard these airlines and they see the value. They understand because obviously they have a pain point on their end. So yeah, we're here to solve that problem. And hopefully, in the next months or year, like people could easily then travel with their pet. There's also an unrealized market. There's people that want a pet, but they don't have a pet because they think about travel. But if it's not that difficult and we can solve that, that means that they can have a pet and they can enjoy their pet and they can have them with them when they travel or when they relocate. And we can improve that process, but especially when it comes to cargo. Yeah.
Yeah, 100% true. I was going to ask you on like the growing market thing, this whole like future of work, the changing landscape of remote workers. Do the airlines recognize that? Like I think this is a key part of that demographic of the potential market for them is people who have these more traditional lives, but they want to go, now they can go and they can spend 3 months in France. And so they're going to want to take that piece of their life with them. Do you think that resonates with them?
I think that airlines are trying to look at the passenger journey, but I think that they're looking at numbers and they're not always as focused on, well, what does the user persona look like? I don't think that they're looking at it that way, but I think that they're starting to. As a matter of fact, there's actually a conference that's coming up that is about the passenger journey. So I think that airlines are now saying, okay, let's step back from the data and let's just actually look at the customer journey. Like, what do they need? For example, like when you're traveling somewhere and it's an international country, do you have a SIM card? There's a great company that I know, SimTex. They're like working with airlines so that you can actually get your SIM card immediately. You don't have to purchase a physical one. You don't have to do anything. It's just like super simple. Like you just enable it. So like those are different things. Like now, okay, what do you need next when you arrive? What do you, Wi-Fi? What do you need? Like, so I think they're starting to think about that a little bit more. Obviously, we are targeting those who are in charge of these programs so that they can actually like start emphasizing on like, well, a lot of your customers have pets or live animals. So we do cater to pets and live animals. And service animals. So it could be even equestrian, it could be livestock, lab animals as well. So any of those, like we are, working with specific organizations and bodies to improve that whole process.
You mentioned the other animals, which is very important to distinguish there because that is really important. It's the thing that's always really funny to me when you read the documentation on moving pets around. An animal that's always mentioned is ferrets. And I'm like, I don't know that many people that have ferrets, but but that's one that's always in there. Yeah. And there's obviously every airline has different policies. So like which ones they allow and how they allow them. And so, that's an airline specific thing. It is. Yeah. Oh yeah. Airline specific, country specific, like origin and destination, and different airports have different stuff. There's so many things to consider. And I think it's like on a kind of like serious note, it's really important for people who are considering doing this to like really take it seriously because it's a pretty, the travel bit, especially if the animal's going like under as cargo, it's air conditioned, it's climatized, but it's a terrifying, like terrible experience. Like it can be really traumatizing. And so like you want to, I don't know, I think it's worth mentioning, like you want to put the extra effort into ensuring a good experience for them. It's all possible. Like don't let this stop you from your abroad journey and moving to that foreign place that's calling to you. You can work around it and do it. There's cool tech emerging to enable this, but take it seriously and don't just like wing it,
Yeah, absolutely. And do whatever you can to prepare your pet. I think a lot of times people are so focused on, okay, there's going to be a trip coming, but are you preparing your pet in the crate or their kennel, get them familiar with like loud noises or something. There's also things like anxiety supplements. There's also tracking collars that'll also just show you like their health. So all of these different things that can help improve, that could help you just prepare. But there's things we're working to see how we can streamline that whole process. Yeah.
Awesome. I appreciate what you're doing. I think a lot of pet owners and that Venn diagram where you have pet owners and nomad types or people who like to spend time abroad, those of us that live in that middle section of the Venn diagram really appreciate what you're doing. And I love following the work, and you're embracing that whole build in public thing, which I think is cool, and talking about your failures, successes, the pivot, all of that. So, watching from a distance, it's been a lot of fun, and this has been really cool to hear more about your personal story. So really, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing too, like your own journey as well. That's what this podcast is for, right? Everyone who's hearing, either you're on the verge of starting to work remotely, whether it's with a company as a contractor or starting your own, project. Like, there's a lot of us that are here to help you along the way. Like, if you have questions, reach out. I know personally, anyone can reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm very active there. I'd be more than happy to assist. And sometimes you just need like that extra boost of confidence. Obviously, you're going to map out and plan out what makes sense for you. But, a lot of us have gone through this journey, and we're there to help support. And that's what the community is about. So, thanks for allowing this platform to help inspire the next generation of remote workers or nomads. And there's a beautiful world out there to explore. Take advantage of it. If you have the opportunity, it'll change your life forever.
100% agree. And it's a lot more fun with your quote unquote family. Like, if your furry friend if you consider he's part of your family.
Of course it is.
It's a lot more fun. You mentioned Coco as a little, like a little world traveler. Like, Coda's got his passport, and we're bouncing around, and he's checking out different places around the world. I like to joke and say that he's living the dog dream. My wife reminds me he probably just wants like a backyard and routine, but I'm like, yeah, whatever. No, he's
they love it.
In Italy today. He's cool.
No, I mean, they're so excited to explore. Actually, we went to Sicily for a week. He loved it. He was like in the Mafia Museum, and he was here on the beach, and he like all these amazing things. And then we come back, and it was so funny. We're like, he legit looks depressed. Like, he's like, oh, we're back, same block. I've smelled this block like a million times. So, it's actually exciting for them. They're experiencing new smells, new environments, new animals. Like, I'm sure they like to
explore too. I like to think so. We're on the same wavelength. I'm adopting your story. So, thanks again, Nicole. I'm going to let you get out of here, and really appreciate you sharing the story. Real quick before you go, where can people follow along? We'll put all these links in the show notes, but just while people are listening, we can let them know where to find you and learn more.
Yeah, so you can find me again, like on Twitter or LinkedIn, Nicole X Caba. So you can find me there, and also you can follow along Avvinue, which is spelled Avvinue. We have our Twitter and LinkedIn and a few social channels, so you can connect with us. But happy to connect with anyone who's planning their journey, and best of luck.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll talk to you again soon. I look forward to watching the adventures of Coco around the world, and you tagging along as well. So thanks again. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Chase.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.